on fire. And I'm going to date myself right now, when I say I'm about to pull a Paul Harvey here, and I'm going to say, now you're going to know the rest of the story. Because the story behind how this story even made it to the air that day is fantastic. I'd been pushing for that story for weeks. There was going to be one game, one chance to get that story. But the problem, on that one day, there were only 2 of us nightside reporters for that night, and I felt my heart sink when I walked into that meeting. I knew the potential this story had. And I was a news reporter. They hired me to report news. I owed it to them to report news. And I remember how I said at the beginning, you guys, you remember how I said about God being the designer of the brand of these stories, remember? I know beyond any doubt that he was the one who moved a mountain and saw to it that that story got covered by one station to inspire many. Not just covered, but you know what? Did you guys notice it was the lead story? Did you notice when the anchors do the introduction? We begin tonight, I wrote that, with some good news instead of bad. And they read it. I'm like, all right, cool. It was the lead story, not just made the newscast, because it was a story that uplifts, encourages, and inspires. It led the #1 11 p.m. newscast in Cleveland, and it turns out this is what happened. The hard news story fell through. The call from my boss went something like this: look, Ty's story fell through. We're moving you to the lead, and it better be good, Dawn. I'm serious, it better be good. And I went, challenge accepted. Challenge accepted. A story I am convinced not only made the air, but led the newscast by divine design. Y'all, but God. But God. But here's the question. What was I really rooted in through all of this? My head kept saying, you better keep your nose to the grindstone. What a privilege to be working as a reporter here. And my heart kept saying, nope, nope, nope. Ladies, what if you identify the conflict in your heart today? Which ways are you being pulled? Which way feels like God's voice moving in you so that he can move mountains for you? Each of you know what it is in your heart. What if the mountain is yourself that needs to be moved right out of your own way? And for me, the anxiety over I could really relate. Thank you for sharing and being so vulnerable earlier. That anxiety over not listening to him, it was taking its toll. Philippians 4, 6 through 7, I've had it memorized as far back as I can remember, even high school, I think. It's my jam. Be anxious for nothing. Nothing. But in all things, in every situation, by prayer and petition, let your requests be known to God. Like, shout them out. Even the really, God, really, I need help understanding that. Shout them out. Let your requests be known to God. And the peace of God that surpasses all understanding, bigger than anything we could imagine, will protect our hearts and our minds through Christ Jesus. Be anxious for what? Nothing. Nothing. As usual, Paul doesn't mince words. My conflicted heart was anxious, and mentally, emotionally, physically, it showed. Did you notice my hair in the Ryan Gets in the Game story? It was literally breaking off, y'all. I was physically so conflicted. I mean, one astute viewer, she even wrote into the station to point it out. She said, this is a quote, "How in the world does Channel 3 allow Dawn Kendrick on the air like that?" Okay. How in the world? So I saw on her social media that there was a picture, her last post was of her elderly sister in a hospital bed, and she said, Sissy went to heaven to be with the Lord. And old Dawn wanted to write, "I am so sorry for your loss. But how in the world is Sissy getting into heaven with bedhead like that?" Oh, no, you can't say. No, that was old Dawn. Sorry. That was old Dawn. I told you I'm going to be vulnerable. New Dawn, however, wrote to her personally and invited her to chat, in which I could explain the real, raw, vulnerable answer to her question. Anxiety is real, y'all. And see, I believe that Paul knew the heart and the mind are so very different. I bet he knew it. My head said nose to the grindstone in that job that was breaking my heart. My heart wasn't having it. Ladies, don't you know it would have been fewer words for Paul to say, we'll protect you through Christ Jesus. But is Paul speaking to you today, and how specific he was in saying he will protect our hearts and our minds through Christ Jesus? Yeah? God has both our hearts and our minds covered, ladies. Trust him. We need to trust him. We need to know that he's leading. And don't you know, God is so much more interested in our character than our careers. My heart knew. I knew where I was supposed to be rooted. My mind stayed rooted, though, in fear and doubt and in a career instead of a calling. So let's promise, if we could, to not let ourselves forget who we are and whose we are.